There's this pervasive myth in our culture, especially in the business world, about what a change agent actually looks like. We have this very specific caricature in mind.
Oh, absolutely. The loud, disruptive, visionary type.
Exactly. It's the guy walking into the boardroom with a sledgehammer, the whole move fast and break things archetype. We tend to associate progress with noise and improvement with destruction. Like if you aren't flipping tables, are you really changing anything?
Well, because it's visible, right? You can see the destruction, so it feels like action. But usually the guy with the sledgehammer just leaves a massive mess that someone else has to clean up.
Precisely. But today we're flipping that script. We are looking at a stack of research from the Max Energy ME80 personality system that argues the most sustainable high-impact change doesn't come from burning the building down. It comes from the people who are quiet, methodical, and surprisingly focused on the past.
It's a really fascinating paradox. We are talking about a profile that moves forward essentially by looking backward.
Yeah, today we are doing a deep dive into the AFAN profile. In the system, they call this the reflective reformer. And if you were listening and you've ever felt like you're the only sane person in a room full of chaotic visionaries, this deep dive might just explain why.
I think it's going to be incredibly validating for a lot of people.
So let's set the stage with the first point. What exactly are we working with here? For the listener who hasn't gone down the rabbit hole with us before, can you frame the Max Energy ME80 system? Because this isn't just a basic introvert or extrovert test.
No, not at all. Think of the ME80 system less like a simple label and more like an architectural blueprint for human energy. It doesn't just describe what you do. It maps out the mechanics of how you process the world.
Right, like the actual wiring diagram behind the behavior.
Exactly. It maps out how you take in information, how you filter it emotionally, calculate a decision, and finally release that energy as action. And within the system, the AFAN, or reflective reformer, is a very specific, high-functioning piece of architecture. It's designed for one main thing, which is optimization.
Optimization. I love that. So let's get into their identity. Every profile has a core declaration or a hero section. What is the headline for the AFN?
Well, the source material has a phrase that really stops you in your tracks. It says, the AFN awakens through remorse.
Awakens through remorse. That sounds almost, heavy, almost tragic. Does this mean they're just walking around feeling guilty all the time?
It's super easy to misinterpret that. In this context, remorse isn't about wallowing in shame. It's really about a hypersensitivity to error. It's a mechanism. When an AFAN looks at a situation, whether it's a project or a conversation, they don't just see what happened. They immediately see the gap between what happened and what should have happened.
So it's not emotional baggage, it's a gap analysis.
That is a perfect way to put it. They are obsessed with systemic correction. While the revolutionary wants to invent something entirely new, the AFN looks at the existing foundation and says, this beam is weak. If we reinforce this, the whole structure holds more weight. They reform work with gentle yet firm adjustments.
Gentle yet firm. Which leads us to their control mechanism, their philosophy of how they navigate things. The notes mention a concept called responsibility first.
Yeah, this is the engine under the hood. The AFAN tends to have a global view where they create an internal vacuum for responsibility. We live in a world where the default reaction to failure is pointing fingers. Like the market crashed or my team didn't listen.
Right, externalizing the blame.
Yeah.
Saying it's not my fault.
Exactly. But the AFAN's very first instinct is, how did I fail to anticipate the market crash? Or how did I fail to communicate clearly so my team would listen? They are incredibly strict with themselves, yet tolerant of others.
That seems like a crucial distinction. They aren't holding everyone else to this impossible standard of perfection.
No, and that's the tolerant part. They understand human fallibility in other people, but they demand near perfection from their own handling of the system. They value principles but achieve correction through subtle, sustainable methods rather than just brute force.
So they aren't the drill sergeant screaming in your face. They're more like the coach pulling you aside, speaking quietly, and showing you how to adjust your grip by 2 millimeters.
And that 2-millimeter adjustment fixes your swing forever. That's the AFAN style.
Let's open up the hood and look at the wiring. We talked about the energy matrix in the ME80 system. Structurally, how is the AFAN built?
The AN is described as a bridge. It's a personality form that bridges capacities. It stands on 3 pillars. They are capable of action, they are highly communicative, but the linchpin is that they are always reflecting before reforming.
I really want to break this down layer by layer. because the system uses these terms IP, IQ, EQ, manifestation, and they need something very specific here. Let's start at the very bottom of the core. The IP layer or inner value layer. The definition here is direction sense activated.
Which means they have this internal GPS. They aren't drifting through life. Deep down, they have a very specific orientation. They know where true north is in terms of their values and the direction things should go. Even sitting quietly in a meeting, they're mapping the conversation against this internal compass.
Okay, so the GPS is on and locked. Now moving up to the IQ layer. In this system, this is the emotional activation layer. And the definition here surprised me. It's intuition and speed judgment.
It catches everyone off guard. We usually think of reflective people as slow, right? Like a philosopher sitting under a tree.
Exactly, but the notes say they are fast.
Their initial reaction is lightning fast. That's the intuition part. When a problem arises, they get an immediate ping. They spot the error or the inconsistency instantly. The data hits them hard and fast.
But and here's the kicker. They don't act on that ping immediately.
No, because right on top of that fast IQ layer sits the EQ layer, the decision calculation layer.
And the definition there is emotional detachment and understanding.
This is the cooling system. The IQ layer screams alert something is wrong, but the EQ layer steps in and says, step back. Let's look at the context. It allows them to detach from that initial emotional spark. Instead of reacting, they calculate and analyze the variables. This detachment makes them look calm on the outside, even if alarm bells are firing on the inside.
That perfectly explains the reflective part of the name. They buffer the raw data before letting it out. So we have the GPS for IP, the fast start for IQ, the cool calculation for EQ, and finally the manifestation layer.
Which is defined as energy released outward, impact, action, manifestation.
This is so important because it dispels the myth that these people are just daydreamers or purely theoretical.
Correct. They aren't paralyzed. All that internal reflection eventually converts into tangible outward action. They release the energy, they build the bridge, they fix the system. They're philosophers who actually get things done.
Let's dig deeper into their inner traits, specifically this idea of reflection and correction. The source material emphasizes a human element, because systemic correction can sound very cold, like a robot debugging code.
And that is a danger for some efficiency-minded types, but not the AFAN. The AFAN is deeply concerned with humanity. They are constantly weighing the trade-offs between principle and humanity.
What does that look like in a real-world scenario?
Imagine a company needs to cut costs to survive. A cold efficiency expert might just look at a spreadsheet and fire the bottom 10%. Problem solved, the math works.
The brutal spreadsheet approach, yeah.
The AFAN rejects that entirely. They seek an improvement path that neither harms people nor breaks long-term operation. They will agonize over finding a solution that fixes the budget without leaving scars on the staff. They might restructure workflows or find supply chain waste specifically to avoid hurting people.
They really hate the drastic measure.
They view drastic measures as a failure of planning. If you have to amputate it, it means you didn't treat the infection when it was small. The AFAN wants to treat the infection early, gently, and effectively.
That's noble, but there has to be a cost. You can't process that much responsibility and that much care without paying a tax. Let's talk about the shadow blind spot.
The kryptonite here is internalization and hesitation.
Which comes directly from that responsibility-first mindset we just talked about.
Exactly. Because they take so much responsibility, they can become paralyzed by it. When a problem arises, the AM tends to over-reflect. They go into what the source calls regret cycles.
Regret cycles? That sounds exhausting.
It consumes a massive amount of psychological energy. They generate hidden guilt, thinking, I should have seen this coming, or if I had just checked the data one more time. Even if the outcome was out of their control, they replay the tape to find their own error.
And the tricky part is nobody else sees this happening right, because of what the report calls social masking. Regarding unreasonable situations, they often compress them internally.
Compressing is such a vivid image. To you on the outside, they look compliant. They might be nodding in the meeting, but internally, they're maintaining a massive distance. They've checked out, or they're suffering in silence.
That is highly dangerous for a leader to miss. You think your reflective reformer is on board, but actually they're drowning in internalized disagreement.
And eventually, that compression causes a crack. Not an explosion, usually just a quiet withdrawal.
This bleeds right into their social relationships as well. The vibe is described as gentleness and restraint, which sounds lovely, but maybe tricky in a negotiation.
They present a mature, tactful, and unassuming impression. Their speech is careful, their actions are thorough, but the report notes they do not favor open conflict.
So if I pitch a terrible idea to a AFAN, they aren't going to flip the table and tell me it's garbage.
Never. They express disagreement through questions and discussion.
Ah, the Socratic method of rejection.
Exactly. They'll say something like, have we considered the long-term implications of this, instead of just saying, this is bad?
And the downside of that restraint.
The downside is that people often sense there are unspoken thoughts and concerns hidden beneath the surface. You might walk away from a conversation with an AFAN thinking, I feel like they wanted to say something else. That restraint can create a barrier to true intimacy or raw honesty.
It's the cost of being so polite and careful. Okay, let's pivot to the practical application. Business value. If I'm a CEO or a team leader, why do I need an AFAN on my payroll?
You need them because they possess a mature capacity for continuous optimization. Most people are satisfied with the status quo as long as nothing is literally on fire. The AFAN is never satisfied with the status quo. They are always asking, how can we do better next time?
They aren't just spotters, they are fixers.
Mhm.
And the notes say they excel at execution by decomposing complex transformations into executable small steps.
Right, if you have a grand vision, the AFAN breaks it down into a checklist that actually gets you there.
And they turn experience into organizational assets. They document, they standardize, but they balance the systems with human nature so the corrections don't wound people.
They build the manual that people actually want to use.
So based on all this system building and gentle correction, where should the reflective reformer be working? What are the recommended professional fields?
The source outlines 4 key environments where the AFAN thrives. First, obviously, is review and process optimization. Anything involving refining systems, quality assurance operations, and pursuing excellence.
That makes total sense. Second,
Organizational improvement or system correction. Gently yet firmly driving internal change. This could be HR leadership change management or organizational development, places where you need the velvet glove.
and the third one.
Teaching and experience transfer. Because they organize insights so well, they are great at inspiring others. They don't just teach what they teach, the how and the why. They love transferring that wisdom.
And the fourth one feels like the really big picture role.
Long-term development and transformation projects. Methodically realizing systematic upgrades. If you're restructuring a corporation over 5 years or managing a massive software migration, you want an AFAN holding the map. They have the stamina for the long, slow fix.
It sounds like the world needs a lot more of this energy right now.
Yeah.
We're so obsessed with disruption, we completely forget about calibration.
Disruption is flashy, but calibration is what keeps the lights on.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the AFAN profile, let's try to summarize. What is the one thing, the golden sentence that defines them?
The report concludes with this thought, and I think it really resolves that tension of remorse we started with. It says, when reflection is taken seriously and corrections actually produce results, the reflective reformer can be certain they are not endlessly self-blaming, but quietly making systems better step by step.
Quietly making systems better step by step. That is a powerful legacy.
It really is. It's the power of the invisible repair.
For you listening, whether you identify as an AFAN or you work with one, hopefully this gives you a new appreciation for that quiet pause, that moment of looking back before moving forward.
Absolutely. Don't mistake that hesitation for fear. It's calibration.
Now, if you want to see the full data on this, this analysis came directly from the Max Energy ME80 Personality Assessment Report.
And if you want to dig deeper into your own profile or the system itself, you can visit the official website at www.maxenergylife.com.
You can also search for Max Energy or Met Energy on Facebook to find the community there. There is a whole world of energy mechanics to explore.
Indeed, there is.
I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over. We talked about how the AFAN awakens through remorse.
Yeah.
In a culture that constantly sells us the no-regrets lifestyle, maybe we're missing the point. Maybe regret isn't a weight to carry, but a tool to build with. What if your biggest mistake is actually the blueprint for your greatest contribution?
That is a thought well worth reflecting on.
Thanks for diving deep with us. We'll see you on the next one.
Take care.